Hello and welcome to our new tutorial series. In this series we're going to look at creating an RPG game, so a top-down style game. The assets that I'm going to be using are from this Serene Village, which you can access from itch.io. So this is where we'll get the tile set as well as the Papoya characters. And again, you have the options. You can use other tile sets if you wish, but these are the ones I'm going to download and install into my game. Okay, so once your assets are downloaded, you can add them into your new game. So this is a 2D core URP game, which is how I created it. So before we do that though, one of the things that we should start getting comfortable with is keeping our assets organized. So in your project, so in the assets, if we right click, we're going to create some folders to keep our art organized. So this is where we'll just store our assets for art. We're going to create a folder, call it scripts, and we will also create a folder and call it animations. And I'm sure there will be other kind of random assets that we can keep as well. So with that, what we're going to do is drag in our assets for the Serene Village. So I have the Serene Village art here, so I'm going to just drag it over into the art. And then the Papoya characters, where are they? So similarly, I'm just going to drag those over into the art folder as well. So once these compile, so we should have a series. So the Papoya characters are interesting because there is a number of different characters here. So we can look at enemies, characters, and so on. So first thing today, what we're going to look at is creating our tile map and just adding a simple character. So in the Serene Village, so we can use, so these are different tile sets. So these ones I believe are 16 by 16. These are 32 by 32 and so on. So I'm going to use the 32 by 32, which will give it a little bit more detail. And again, this is one image that has all of these assets. So what we need to do is splice this out. So in order to do that, we click on the one that we want. In the inspector, we are going to change the sprite so it's not single. There's multiple sprites. These are 32 pixels per because it's 32 by 32. And we want to change the filter mode to point no filter. And then we can apply it. And then we go to sprite editor. And in here we go to slice, grid by cell size. So up here we just click this grid by cell size. And again 32 by 32. And then slice and apply it. And that's it. So now all of our assets have been spliced into the individual squares. So with that done, let's actually get one of our characters. So let's save that. I think I'm going to add a character into the game right now. So we'll go to, I'm just going to pick this one here. So with that first one, so again, same thing. We want multiple because it's one sprite sheet for multiple images. And then I'm going to set this to 24, I think. And again, this is one where with this character, we can change the size depending on how big the houses, the sprite assets are, and kind of compare it. So I'm just going to set it to 20 for now. These are 32 by 32 though. So we go, again, point no filter, multiple images, apply that, and then go to sprite editor, slice, grid by cell size, 32 by 32. So slice it, apply it, and we're done. So I'm going to first drag a character into the game. So let's save that and rename our character to, so rename it to player. And while I'm at it, I'm going to tag our player as player. So that sets up our player. So it'll just give us some reference as we build our game style. So that's done, so that's good. So right now we want to create a tile palette for the background. So we want to paint in a scene. So in our assets, so again, this is the one that we have. So you can see we spliced all of these, but we're not going to drag these in to paint it. So we're going to use a tile palette. And if you don't have the tile palette already opened up as a window, to access it, you just go, and yours will end up not being docked like mine is right now, so I'll just drag it off. But you'll go Windows, 2D, and then Tile Palette, and it'll create this tile palette. So I just like mine docked over here, so I'll dock it over there, and then it's quite simple. So right now you don't have a tile palette, so we want to create one. So click on where it says no tile palette, create a tile palette. I will call it Serene Palette, which is just so that's our name of our assets. And with these, we want to create a new folder. So we want to keep these stored in, so Serene Palette, and we'll select that as our folder. So select it, done. And now it's as simple as, so this here is where our palette's going to be. So take the one, make sure you grab the one that you sliced and just drag it up into the palette here. And make sure we select our folder, because what's going to happen is it creates, in this case, 700 different tile assets. So we want to make sure that these are generated outside of this here, because we can drag some of these objects. So from here, we slice these. It's not going to let me scroll through those. But if there's, so for example, as we scroll through this, if you want a bush as an object so that you can interact with it and destroy it, mind you can do that in the tile maps as well, or a sign. So for example, a sign we might have as a generalized object. So we can just drag that into the game as well, right? So we can drag it into the game, and there's the sign. So we don't need that right now, though, so I'm going to just leave that there. However, this tile palette, those are created separately in a different folder now, and now we can paint our scene. So in order to paint the scene, it's as simple as right-clicking in your hierarchy. We go 2D object, tile map, and then rectangular, and it creates that. So we're going to call this background. And then we're going to create another one. So make sure you click on the grid so it doesn't create a whole bunch of different grids. 2D object, tile map, rectangular. I'm going to call this midground. And I'm going to create another one. So 2D object, tile map, rectangular. Call it foreground. And I'm going to create one more. 2D object, tile map, rectangular, and call it above player. And the purpose of these is we want to, so for example, right now, in order to paint, so if we click on the background layer, I can click on this grass tile in the palette, so make sure your palette is selected. And then we can paint on the grass. So I'm going to use this grass, which is just a generalized grass. It doesn't have any of the other, so we don't want a corner there. So I could paint with this paintbrush, and so I can paint individual tiles. However, if you want just a big area, you can click on this square, which if you kind of hover over it, it'll tell you paints a filled area with the box. So we can click on that, and then I can just, oh, I must not have selected on it. And now I can just paint a large area. So our player, you'll notice, is gone now. However, that's just because of the layering. So let's set up our layers. So the background, actually before we do that, just quickly, the purpose of these different layers, so if I go to the midground, for example, and paint the grass, or sorry, flowers, and that's going to paint over top, of course. So sometimes, though, it just depends where we are. It may paint over top of, so I want to be in the background here. That's why I had switched. So if you paint these in the background, you can see that it paints over top, so now you can't see the grass behind the flowers. So let's just go to my midground layer and erase the things that I had done there. Did I do anything in the foreground? No. And we'll go back to the background, and we'll just paint the grass back in. So what we want to be able to do is paint the grass over top of, paint the flowers over top of the grass. So before we do that, though, we want to set up the layers. So let's do that first. So in our background, the inspector, we want to set this to 0, which it is. The midground, we're going to set to 1. The foreground, we're going to set to 2. And our player, we're going to set to 3. And then the move player, we are the above player, we're going to set to 4. So when we paint, we're going to be able to interact as well as move behind the object. So this one that's above the player is where you would be behind an object. So for example, if we quickly paint in, for example, a couple of trees. So if I paint this row of trees in, so let's go in the foreground. And we'll paint these trees in. And then in the above ground, or the above player, I'm going to paint the tops of the trees in. So right now, if we were to move our player, and since we don't have a script on it to move, we can move it just simply by moving it around. So you can see right now that as we move, we can be in front of the trees. So your head goes behind there, but that's, and again, once we have colliders on, you won't be able to get here, for example, where your head, half your head's missing. So we'll kind of walk up towards the tree, and you'll be in front of the trees. Similarly, as we go behind the trees, we'll be able to walk behind the trees, right? And your character is behind the trees. So that's the purpose of that. The other thing, and I know we don't have colliders on, actually we'll do the colliders, I think, in the next one. So that's the main purpose. So the midground will be things that we can walk over top of. So things that maybe you don't want to, like for example, the flowers here, right? So flowers, we can generally walk over top of the flowers, so that would be painted in the midground. If we go to the houses, so the foreground, which is where our collisions are going to be, your player won't be able to walk, so it's going to collide with it. So we generally will put the bottom of the house in the foreground. I'm going to paint the midground as where the steps are, so that will allow us to kind of walk right up to the house. And then the above player, we would paint the top of the house. So that's going to go there. And now, again, similarly, if we kind of grab our player and move our player, oh, that's not our player. So if I grab my player and move the player around, same thing, right? So as the player walks towards the house, your character is going to be in front of the house, and then it gets to the door. So vice versa, as you walk, your player will be able to go up and walk behind the house. So your player, so it gives that perception of depth within your level. So at this point, you can kind of continue to develop a simplified level. In the next video, we will look at adding some scripts to our player to allow your character to move through the levels. Just quickly, I'll highlight a few other things. So generally, so a fence, for example, is going to be on a foreground. So if we take the fence, make sure we're in foreground, and we can paint the fence in. So your fence is going to be in the foreground. So your character, if it collides with it, it's not going to be able to move through the fence. Similarly with rocks, so you might have these bigger rocks we can do the same as we did for the house. And the trees, we can paint the bottom of the rock in the foreground, and we'll paint the top of the rock in the above player. So it'll give that perception of your player kind of going behind the rock. For the water, typically your water edges anyway, so we can paint the foreground, and we can do this as water. So we just grab the water there, and let's just paint a big area here. So we can do the water like that, which creates a collision. And then your collisions themselves, so with the edges, that's going to be a foreground. So those are going to be the collisions. If you have areas that have, so let's say we have something like this, and let's just go up here. So these tiles here gives you those corners, right? So this tile, for example, gives you these inner corners to paint. No, that's not the right one. So that would be, oh, this one. So that's going to be this corner here. And then we have this little tiny corner here with that little edge there that's going to paint there. And then we could also use, so the bottoms could also be these curved ones. Again, we'll paint that little corner to the little corner there. And you can kind of continue on and paint these in. So these corners, or this one here, do I have one that... No, so I don't have any specifically that would be for those just yet. So anyway, so that's it for that. So you can work on building a level, so add more houses, add some collisions, and so on with the level. So in the next video, we'll look at creating our movements for the player. And that's it for this tutorial. Hopefully I'll see you in the next one.